say a few words before we start?
So welcome everyone back to ISO 26211. This first session we'll be hearing from one of our major liaisons, Dgiwg. So we have several people visiting us from Dgiwg, as well as our own liaison people to Dgiwg. So welcome to Neil Wharton Neil Larkin online. Sorry, wrong Neil.
Lee Carpenter.
And Lee Carpenter, who introduced himself to me only 10 minutes ago. There you go. So I will hand over for this next session of an hour or so to Jan to lead as one of our liaison people to Dgiwg, and I think you're then going to introduce the others better than I've just mentioned to.
Yeah, thank you very much. We'll try to give an impression of what we actually do in Dgiwg regarding to the use of civilian standards and what we're also doing in general. And it will be Neil Larkin, our director of Dgiwg, who will start introducing Dgiwg, and then Lee will take over, and then I will take over and give something about what our recent activities are. And then we have Dimitri Safinov, hopefully joining. He's not in the room at the moment. To give some news of impact of Dgiwg, and then Marie Bois will give some future pointing of Dgiwg, and I understand that you also, Neil, will end up giving some more high-level summarizing Dgiwg's approach to the future related to standardization, and of course there's some Q&A at the very end. But with that, I think I will turn over to you, Neil, and it will be that you just say next slide whenever you are ready to change slide.
Thank you very much indeed. And I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate being given this opportunity this morning. I do have to apologise. I was really hoping to be there with you in Chiswick this morning. I've been working in Whitehall all week, and unfortunately the calendar has meant that I had to go in a different direction this morning. So you get me in whatever version of virtual land I appearing on the big screen on. As Jan has said, there's a number of us going to say a few words this morning just to either introduce or reintroduce the Defence Geospatial Information Working Group, the work it does, and our direction going forward. If you could just click on, let's go bold, let's click on 2 slides, see what happens for me, please.
Okay. Sorry.
That's a great slide. Let's start with that. So our vision is all about interoperability of geospatial information and services in the multinational defence environment. The mission, you probably will recognise this, but it's very much a requirements-driven multinational cooperation body. We're here to provide advice and recommendations on the standardisation of geospatial information and services for and amongst the participating members of defence organisations. And it's really about the interoperability challenges we have. Some by creating and others by recommending standardization of artifacts, pure standards, pure specifications through handbooks and guidance material, and all the guidance material required to enable the provision, production, exchange, exploration, and real use of geospatial information within the defence context. We've been around since 1983, and Dgiwg continues to provide that expert advice and guidance on standardization and service amongst participating nations, and we'll say a little more about that in a moment. Our specification artifacts are about enabling the provision, production, exchange, and exploration of geospatial information. And it's really about meeting those modern defence challenges. As you can see on the screen, we're a body that's come together through a memorandum of understanding. So it is nations apply to join and are accepted by the rest of the membership, usually at a reasonably senior level within their defence ministry or international affairs ministry. And contributions are through the provision of expertise. So as I said, it's completely voluntary. It's by association through signing member understanding, and it's a provision of experts. You can see on the screen, it's no central funding. Whilst the vast majority of our work is supporting NATO and other alliances, a huge amount is about presenting aligned, cohered, and well, quite literally standardized information for the wider community, not least those who are supporting UN peacekeeping. Can you just click on again for me, please? And in the military community, this is, I would say, wouldn't I, wearing a bit of military uniform on a Friday morning, this is incredibly important because the key for us is about interoperability, because we plan and fight in coalitions. Virtually never do we go on operation anymore as a single nation. And we individually can't collate we can't collect the complete global data sets by ourselves. We certainly can't afford to buy the complete global data set by ourselves with every level from seabed to stars. And like most of us, we haven't got time to get that complete set together. So what we need to do is ensure the quality of the data is correct quality. We need to share data across networks. It's no longer about just provision of hard copy mapping. And we need to work collaboratively, especially when we start conducting analysis on that data. But to get all this to happen, it's not just about standardization. Clearly an area you all know probably far better than I. It's about providing that framework. And the way the standards are designed tend to mean there's a degree of interpretation in them, which by the time, in our case, 23 different countries start implementing them, end very rapidly without the interoperability that we're driven for. As different parts of industry profile the standards in ways that make sense to them and not necessarily to us. And this then causes immense difficulty when you come to plug the systems together, whether it's 2, whether it's 3, whether it's 100, and they need to be compliant. The certificates that the manufacturers, that the nations have, say they meet standard X or standard Y, but we have found so often that they don't actually talk to each other. And that's what Dgiwg is really focused on, and why we believe, at least, we're so valuable to the military community. By profiling these open standards, we create that set of rules, which in most cases mean that if something is compliant, it will talk to all the other things that are compliant. Dgiwg builds upon generic and abstract standards for geospatial information, some clearly defined by yourselves, others by the Open Geospatial Consortium, to address a number of probably defence specific use cases and requirements. But we like to make it difficult for ourselves, and we have a number of additional interoperability challenges. The biggest one, which many in the room probably can see straight away, is we like to put security classifications, not just on data, but on the systems on which they run, which make it really, really difficult just to adhere straight away to an open standard, an open framework. We then spend time working in either denied or interrupted service, or service with extraordinarily limited bandwidth, where it would have taken far longer than the 3 minutes it took Jan to email the presentation across the room to get a mere fraction of that information to military forces around the world. And those locations very, very often are not fixed. We jump from one theatre of operations to another at great speed. And the availability of equipment is not always what we would like. We can't just go to PC World, to Currys, to a big box store to replace it. Some of the equipment we use takes years, decades to bring into service, and decisions that are made at one stage need to be fit for purpose in the future. So the interoperability challenge continues for us, not just in a true military context, but when we get to things such as the safety of navigation as well. Really, really big questions when you start moving capital ships, aircraft carriers around the world, where they're taking data feeds from many, many international partners rather than just the home base. Could you just click on for me again to the next slide? As you probably caught in the earlier slide, Dgiwg is now a member organisation of 23 full members, and has been so since Finland joined us early last year. There are 3 nations that have observer status, Austria, Poland and Switzerland, and I hope in the near future one of those will become the 24th full member. If there is anyone in the room representing a nation where you can't see your flag, feel free to talk to Lee, to talk to Jan, to talk to other members of the team, or reach out to me if you want more detail about the membership process. It is something where we are very, very definitely better by working together, because the individual nations cannot do all this on their own. The expertise you need for some of this detailed work only exists in small pockets, and bringing it together really provides the benefit to military organizations, all of whom are looking at standardization and interoperability. Should we just click on to the next one? And Lee, I think I'm going to hand over to you if that's all right. And you talk the room and those online through a bit more of the detail of how we're set up.
Yes, thank you, Neil. So I'm Lee Carpenter. I'm part of Neil's team in the UK, but I also serve as the Dgiwg Requirements Coordinator. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just give you a bit of context about how we do our business. So I'll start with a little bit about how we're organised. The core of our work is obviously through our technical group, our technical panels. We're split into 5 panels of work. We have vector data, we work on vector data standards, imagery data, metadata, a portrayal panel, and also a web service panel. There's lots of interaction between the groups, so they're not all work in isolation. We have a quality panel as well, oversees the quality control over all the work that we produce as well. The technical group, led by a technical coordinator, they meet twice a year in person as a collective, but also the individual panels also get together and do meetings at various times of the year to progress their work. So that's where the real work is done. Supporting that, we have our enabling group, we have secretariat, web service managers, etc., to help support that role. Over here is the requirements group, which is my area. My role is to collate requirements. As we mentioned, we are a requirements-led organisation, so I both receive the requirements, process it, help program what goes actually into the program of work. But I also have the responsibility to understand the work going on in the technical group, so I can promote it with our clients to try and create new requirements and new work items. Together, these groups, we all come under and it's all managed through our policy, technical and strategy group, essentially our management group that decide what we do, when we do it, how we resource it, etc., etc. And then that group, which Neil chairs, also reports to our overall plenary group, which meets once a year, which is chaired by Neil. That's where all the heads of delegations get together and discuss what we've been up to during the year. So that's just a very quick overview of how we're organised. Next slide, please. Who do we engage with? Well, on the right side here, this is our main client base. Mainly, we obviously serve our member nations or groups of nations who will assign requirements to us. As it says there, they request, these will implement, use our standards in policy, utilise, make use of them. NATO, our clients, use the programme through the joint geospatial standards working group within NATO. We engage with them. They set us requirements, we report back to them, and we also have some dealing with the intelligence and imagery guys on some imagery standards as well. So there's various bodies in the NATO field that we engage with. We also have some engagement with collaboration production programs, specifically the Geospatial collaboration program, MGCP, who collects 50K and urban data, so they make use of our standards. We also have the international program of human geography, another example of a data production agency that make use of our standards. We'll hear more about these groups going forward in a bit more detail. So that's our client base, but of course, importantly, we've got our standard development world. Yourselves are very important because we build on, as Neil said, we build on commercial standards, open standards. We're not trying to reinvent and create new standards. So our liaison with yourselves is very important. We have liaison with OGC as well. Organisations like the IHO also produce their own standards, so all very important that we understand what's going on in the community and that we can work together to ensure that what we provide to our clients is the best standards for the business. And we also have some other liaisons with various other groups, such as the aeronautical communities and various other bodies that we've worked closely with. So it's an all very close, collaborative, interactive process. Next slide, please. How do we approach our business? Just a few points on there. I mean, again, as Neil said, we are a requirements-driven organisation. We need requirements that drive what we do. So we have to elicit those requirements from our nations. We mentioned the fact it's very important that we adopt open standards. This is why we need that alignment with those commercial public domain standards. We need them to be practical and work and be on top of those things. And this is why we want to build on those standards that have already created in these other groups and just get that defence aspects to them. Largely, we will create implementation profiles of those standards. We also have the burden to test it, because we'll hear about NATO and CWIT and about exercises, how we actually go about actually testing our standards. It's important that all the standards we produce actually go out into the field, into an environment, and actually know that they work, get that feedback in order to progress their practicality. Within the panels, we identify and look at trends. We need to understand what both our client base, what's from a requirements point of view, what's emerging, what do we need to know about in the future,
And we also need to engage with the standard developments. We need to understand where technology is going, what new standards are emerging, and what might be in the future important to defence. So we need to monitor those trends, record them, and ensure that we communicate those messages to the correct bodies. And of course, we maintain a website at present where we can actually publish and socialise the content that we have. Next slide, please. This just gives just an impression. So from my point of view, we manage our requirements. This just gives an example of the sort of range of requirements that we are currently working on. We're currently working on 25 requirements from across our client base, and the majority of them, you can see, are due to be hopefully delivered in the next couple of years. Again, that depends on that resource that we get, receive, and to be able to progress that. So I would maintain the requirements coordinator, manage the requirements, and then our technical coordinator will manage the program of work, specifically within the technical panels. And we'll hear a lot more about the program of work, the actual detailed sort of things that are actually being progressed that then support these requirements. Next slide, please. I think this is my final slide. Just to give a flavour. Here we've already touched on the sort of things that we produce. So obviously, we will produce standards as required, or implementation profiles of existing standards. So we won't go our way to create something new if something suitable already exists or can be modified appropriately. Specifically, we can produce product specifications. So to actually create specific military products that bring together groups of standards into specifications. We write technical reports, white papers to discuss where we need to go next or what approach we're going to take. Each panel produces a roadmap. This is where they record what work they're currently doing, what maintenance process are going through to update existing standards, and also record those trends in those areas that they need to monitor and report and pass forward. And then we also have a Dgiwg reference architecture that helps understand how all our standards fit together when it comes to implementation. And Jan will talk in more detail in that in a moment. Next slide, I think that was why. Yeah, that's a quick run through just really of how we go about our business. And now I'll pass over to Jan, who will give the detail on some of the work that's actually been done in the panels.
Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Well, in Dgiwg, we have a reference architecture, and at the ISO meeting in Stockholm, there was an action workshop. There was one of our colleagues from Dgiwg gave a presentation on the reference architecture. So this could be some kind of refreshment of memories for those who attended that part of that workshop in Stockholm a couple of years ago. Anyway, the Dgiwg reference architecture, in short DGRIA, is developed with strong inspiration of what we have from our reference model in ISO and similarly, we see another organization to ensure that we have the standards, how they fit together, and that we can have them, ensure that we have a coherent product at the end of the day. So we should be able to have an understanding of the value of these, and with this reference architecture, it will make it easier for us to actually take new standards on board and to make sure that they are interoperable among each other. So we have, as a step here on the very bottom, better interoperability between systems and organizations, and we can make it easier and faster to develop new standards. And allowed to be with systems. And last but not least, reduce the cost. The cost is also time. From we have the idea to we have the end product. As we know, we are in ISO. It takes time from we have an idea to have the end product. I usually say it takes 5 years from the idea is voted through to we have at the end of the day. But I know it's going a little bit faster nowadays, but still roughly. And by having this architecture, we can also ensure that we have a reasonably good quality standards and system and product. Next slide, please. And we have the reference architecture is version 1 was of December 22, which I think was when it was presented in Stockholm. And it is an ongoing process to update that. Not necessarily so that we have a new version number, but we have at each meeting, as was mentioned earlier by Lee, that we have a meeting twice a year, and we discuss the work program. We discuss how are there any changes in our small part of the DTRA in the various technical panels. So it is up to date internally, and we also have that ensure that we have an integration with our standards baseline, Dgiwg standard, Geospatial standard baseline, that we take together. And we have again at least making for coherent products. But we also have to look into the future when having such an architecture, because we have all the new APIs coming from ISO ODC. And for example, we have one of those we are actually working on right now, the environmental data retrieval API. And it should also reflect what's in the pipeline, so we can still have a suitable, valuable product. Next slide, please. Well, as it was mentioned, that one of the bigger clients for Dgiwg is NATO. And also put on one of the previous slides that Joint Geospatial Standards Working Group is one of the main customers. And the digital standards, where would they fit into the NATO surroundings? Well, they fit in. First of all, they become standards, which is standard NATO agreements. Also, allied geospatial publication or standard-related documents. These are the three main, the three output channels we have from Dgiwg standards towards NATO, where they can then start using them in their product, in their work of life. Next slide, please. And the civilian standards is very important, both NATO and Dgiwg. As you can see, NATO have a policy that they should not develop any standards on their own if there are something from non-NATO world, which is in practice ISO, ODC, or any civilian standardization organization. And Dgiwg also have stated that they use and develop profiles of civilian standards, which was also touched upon previously by Lee. And I think that's very important to keep in mind, that Dgiwg does not invent new standards as such, but they use whatever they can from the civilian world, and then transform it and adjust it to meet the requirement from the defense community, including adding some new security requirements, as was mentioned previously. Next slide, please. This is just a repetition of what Lee just showed, that the organization of Dgiwg, how we work. We have the technical group. We have the 5 panels. Panel 1, the vector. Panel 2, imagery and grid data. Panel 3, metadata. Panel 4, betrayals, and panel 5, web services. And as it is so fortunate, so we have one of the panel chairs in the room as well. Marie will present later, but she's panel leader on the metadata. Next slide, please. Starting from panel 1, the vector panel. They are in charge of having one of the main outputs from Dgiwg, the Geospatial Information Framework, which will then be transferred into NATO and become NATO Geospatial Information Framework. And they are right now for voting, or actually just finished this last Sunday. And so it will now comes with this panel and be processed accordingly and the application. And it consists at the moment of these documents, a framework which is an overview, and then we have information model, and then we have feature concept dictionary, we will update index, and then some kind of encoding. And now we'll go back to what some discussion we had yesterday in the strategy meeting about the feature catalog and then human model. Because it is actually so that feature concept dictionary is derived from the model, from the information model. They have some tricks of trade which I'm not quite sure I understand completely, but they do that. And then you could ask, what is the real world object index? That is an idea. I think actually it was Lee who invented that in the first place some years ago. It is that if you have, for example, an airport. An airport consists of buildings, green areas, roads, runways, etc. So if you say this element in the map is an airport, okay, then you can point back to the feature concept dictionary and pick the various elements from there. So you say, okay, an airport consists of this, and then you get the necessary objects and attributes for that. And of course, it has to be encoded somewhere. And we have GML at the moment as the encoding format for transferring the data. It might change the future. Next slide, please. So just to, it's also a little bit of repetition of what has been shown, just discussed and shown previously, but we have Dgiwg in the middle as a spider in the web. And then we have international requirements that have external domain communities that does a mapping towards Dgiwg. And we have multinational collection programs like MDCP that was also mentioned previously. They have a profile of Dgiwg so that they can exchange information with that. And of course, we have to ensure that mainly also for our standards that they should be backwards compatible, but it still has to fit into Dgiwg, also Dgiwg. And then Dgiwg is as a derived product of Dgiwg. They have some exchange schemas, and we have data product specifications that are then transferred into MDCP or whatever product. We also have 50K specification, data product specification for that. And this specification is developed based on ISO 19131. The old version, I'll come back to that later, but still another point back towards ISO. And of course, the national requirements and national profiles and use of geospatial data, they also have to fit into Dgiwg so that whenever they need to exchange information to go out in a field somewhere, they can also always use the same maps, same information, because they are all compliant to Dgiwg. Next slide, please. And what are the future for panel 1? Well, the Dgiwg is continuously updated. Not so that it end up with a Dgiwg 3.1, 3.2, 3.4, etc. No, they update the base Dgiwg 3 times a year. So whenever it will be decided that we need a new version of Dgiwg, they can push the button and we have a new version of Dgiwg with all the elements I showed just previously what Dgiwg consists of. And then we need to update ISO 19131, sorry, our profile of ISO 19131 because 19131 has been updated in ISO, so accordingly needs to be updated that as well. And then we have a defense topographic exchange specification, product specification, in short, detox. That needs also to be updated because it relies on the profile of ISO 19131, and we also have an updated version of Dgiwg, so it should be compliant and compatible. And then they are developing some product specification, and that developing product specification is a cross-panel work between all of the 5 panels. Because there are bits elements from each panel that go into such a product specification. And at the moment, they are working on urban city map, defense air charts, and also they will need to develop some kind of urban data exchange. Besides that, they also have a continuous support of various data collection programs that need to be along and supported. Next slide, please. Then we have the imagery and metadata. And they are developing a profile extension of the Geopackage. They are in charge of that. Of course, the Geopackage profile is also some kind of, it is also cross-panel. And they also need to revise our profile of geotiff for georeference images to allow cloud optimized GIF. And at the moment, I can't remember what LERC stands for. But anyway, it's for elevation data. And that's actually something that they are spending quite much time on at the moment to revise and to make better standards profiles for handling the elevation data. And then they are also developing a white paper on point clouds. And I think that white paper is something that would be of interest of more than just the defense community. Next slide, please. And then we have metadata panel. The metadata panel has developed a Dgiwg metadata foundation, and is heavily using ISO 19115 all parts. And yeah, it was originally using the old version, but now we are in the process of updating towards 19115 part 1 and 2 and 4 soon, so it can be in compliance. And it, until now, it is not modeled like we have in ISO, but we are doing that. It's transferring the information to a model, UML model, so it can be included in the information model that I'm using in the vector to ensure that we have a better integration. And we need guidelines. Guidelines how to use metadata, how to interpret the various elements in our metadata foundation. That's something we could spend quite some time on. And then we have a continuous support to the data product specification. Whatever the new one, data product specification appears, they need metadata, and they approach the metadata panel, and we try to give them the best support we can in the panel, as well as the various partner programs like MGCP, IPHD, etc., etc. They also approach us when they need metadata support. How to handle the metadata requirement, how can they fit into the various standards. Next slide, please. Then we have Trail. They are developing a register with web access for the various symbols. And this symbol is in SVG format. It's not ready to launch yet, but they are working on it. And they are also developing symbols for various product specifications, because whenever you have a product, in most cases, you also need some physical output, either on the screen or a piece of paper, and symbols out there in the world need to have some kind of representation on these. And then, of course, as many of the panels, they provide guidance on their subject, in this case, symbolic code. And they are also having some kind of work on doing some simple set for urban mapping and an air chart specification. And that, especially the air chart, is some kind of issue. There have been some discussion going on for quite some time in Dgiwg on what kind of symbols you should use on an air chart. Because if you have an air chart in a military aircraft, they are flying in different lighting, light in the cockpits, so they should be able to read and understand the symbols on the maps when they're flying. Next slide, please. Then we have the web service. You can see again geopackage profile. Geopackage profile is, as I said, it's a cross panel, and they are the two panels that are working heavily on that. And they are also having some. They are working on the revision of our web service profile, because we have also trying to use web service heavily in the defense community. And we're not as fast as mover as the civilian world in this case, because we are still relying on the old VMS, VFS, VMTS, etc. Because the system that they are implemented in are something that can change overnight. Because if you buy an airplane or aircraft carrier, the system implemented there has some time to be fluid before it can be paid off. But having said that, they're also preparing for the OT APIs, and also developing a white paper on APIs, because we need some more information. And last but not least, this panel are the driving force behind introducing GitLab into Dgiwg as a collaboration tool. And I think it works well. Yeah. Next slide, and I think that's you, Dimitri. Welcome on board. Over to you.
Thank you, Jan. Can you hear me well now in London?
Nice. Loud and clear.
Yeah, perfect. So good morning from Paris, from France. So sorry for not being able to attend in person, but I'm happy to be a few people on site. So I'm Dimitri Safner from France, also Dgiwg liaison to ISO TC211, and now I work for the French mapping agency, and now I'm in charge of the defense program lead at GN. So next slide, please. So Dgiwg use and impact. Together with the Dgiwg, there are a few defense co-production programs that exist and that use some of the standards. There are three major co-production programs: MGCP, IPHG, and T-REX. MGCP, so it's a multinational geospatial collaboration program. It's about collection, co-production of data, vector data, at 150,000 scale and also urban scale. So urban scale is about, it's still 5,000. This program use at a technical level specification based on Dgiwg version 3. And they also plan to use Dgiwg profile for GeoPackage. And for sure, for the metadata part, they also use DMS, so the Dgiwg metadata foundation, which is the Dgiwg profile of ISO 19115. So you see that this MGCP program use three major Dgiwg standards, and these standards are based on ISO 1. So the second program is IPIG. So IPIG is a co-production program on human geography. This program also uses Dgiwg standards. It's really centered on cultural context and statistics. And it also uses the metadata part of DMF. And the last one is a T-Rex program. This program produces high resolution elevation data, so it's equivalent to level 3 data on the entire globe. I mean, on 90% of the globe. So next slide, please. So my predecessor already presented what is a STANAG, so a standardization agreement. And the NATO Joint Geospatial Standard Working Group, so the Dgiwg, is a NATO body which really standardized the geospatial component for defense. And there are three major STANAGs, so three major NATO standards that are based on Dgiwg profiles and also relying then on ISO or OGC standards. So we have the number here, but the first one is on metadata and is really based on DMF, and so it's based on ISO 19115. And this standard is led by France. The second one is NGI, so it just, I would say, the NATO copy or the NATO version of DGIF. Now, today it relies on DGIF version 2, but it will rely soon on the new DGIF version 3. And this second STANAG is led by Germany. And the last major NATO standard is 6523. So that's the last one, still in edition 1. It's about web services. And so it's based on Dgiwg profile of WMS, WMTS, WSS, CSW, and WCS. So it's really related on the OGC standards. But you also know that WMS and WFS are also ISO standards. They are ISO 19128 and ISO 19142. So just to highlight you that the NATO community really use the Dgiwg profiles, implement them, and based on also on some ISO standards. Next slide, please. Now I will talk a bit about Chiswick. You may know, or maybe not, know what this acronym is about. It's a NATO exercise which is late every year. The X represents 4 levels of maturity for testing. So it goes from exploration till exercise through experimentation and examine. So it's really these 4 different steps to exercise and to deal with standards. So we have these 4 bullet points at the bottom of the slide. So I will start with the exploration. The exploration is really to explore the new technology. So what we have in terms of new technology developed by some vendors, or developed by the web, or developed by some open source community, or what we have new in the geomatic domain we like to use for defense. The experiment part is about yes, we have new technology, we have drafted some implementation of them, also application of them for defense. We start to make some tests and experiment this new technology in a defense context, and before having a final standards. And then the examine is really when we have a final draft specification, and we try to really validate the systems against this specification. And the exercise is really how do you train both people and system along these standards, these NATO standards or specification in a coalition environment. Next slide, please. So the first slide was really what Chiswick is about. So Chiswick has a geo community in it, because it's not only geo, it's really defense. This exercise is planned each year. It starts from September till April, and the exercise is in June. So it just ended last week for this year. This year was about 2,500 participants on a NATO base in Poland. There were almost 500 systems connected at different classification level network, but there is a unclassified network, but also a NATO secret network. About the geo community, so the geo community was about 60 people, 30 nations plus NATO, 20 systems connected to on the NATO secret network, and more than 300 tests have been achieved during these 3 weeks. Next slide, please. So what is the goal of the geo community within this exercise? In fact, it's not only about geo, but it's also about meteorology and oceanography. So it's really how the defense, how the soldier have a good knowledge of the environment in which they have to exercise. So the GeoMetalk group really provides data and services to all the other communities. So to the land, air, maritime, space, cyber, to the logistic, communication, to the joint ISR for sure, and operational command, so to take decision. So during this exercise, there are scenarios, and the GeoMetalk community is keen at providing all the data this system require for exercising, for operating, and for taking better decision. Next slide, please. Now, well, sorry, we have many acronyms in defense. This is a new one, but it's really an important one. It's about Federation Mission Networking. This acronym is really important, or this initiative is really important. It's about how you can plug and play systems which are deployed in a coalition environment. So it's really we have several nations which are deployed on a specific area, and we want to exercise and connect together. And we just set up the network, and we are able to connect and to talk together and to exchange information. So at the end, this initiative is setting up a set of specification by domain and the process for system to be compliant with this specification. So this is a key initiative to support interoperability. And we have geo specification for this community, and most of the specification are pointing or are based on NATO standards or Dgiwg work. Next slide, please. Here, it's just to make some connection between all the previous slides. So there is a coordination between FMN and Chiswick. So each Chiswick test cycle work on a specific version of FMN specification, and you find back the 4x of Chiswick. So for example, in 24, so this year, system have tested FMN specification version 3 and 4, or SPIRAL 3 and 4. We have examined, so really tested system against SPIRAL 4, and we have experiment SPIRAL 6 and exploration SPIRAL 6 and 7. That means we have started to draft the specification for next generation of NATO system this summer. Next slide, please. Within Chiswick, to come back to Chiswick, this year we found back how Chiswick is interconnected to other work. You find this wheel on the right. We have the standardization. Standardization is really both an input to this test initiative, but also could be a beneficiary of output of the exercise to make evolution or adjustment of the standardization work. So it's really a feedback. We are really looking from this exercise to enhance the standardization. So it's really, really useful to test this draft standards or draft specification against system and against defense system. Next slide, please. And I'm done.
I'm done. Next slide,
Sorry.
please. So just a quick summary before we go to the future impact. So geospatial standards is the heart of interoperability. I think I don't need to convince you too much about this one. We have a close relationship with NATO over requirements. We have seen that, but we have also seen in Dimitri's presentation that it's also about testing and implementation, and that's really something that's important for us. It's a volunteer organization. It's just a volunteer organization, I could say, but it's also the primary powerhouse behind military geospatial standards. And for this, it's only as effective as the sum of its parts. As a panel lead, I would say it's one of the most important parts. National investment is essential if we want to continue our work. Feel free to come. Liaison is vital, and I will come back to that, but we have seen that most of our work is based on the international standards, so we need to continue this interaction with standardization organization. Next slide, please. So to come back about the trends, so Lee mentioned at the beginning that all technical departments maintain roadmaps about what they are doing and what they will do in the future. So this might seem strange for requirements-led organization, but still we need to be aware of what's coming next to be prepared and contribute to those topics in the international organization so that it will fit our future need if the requirements come. And so those are not all probably, but the most important future trends that we have currently in our roadmaps. You will recognize that some future trends might also be some ISO DC 211 trends as well, such as the APIs, the point flows, the new encoding formats as well. We have some more specific one, like the new data product specification, more based on data exchange specification, more than paper maps. We have some feature level metadata work, and some work on dynamic portrayal as well, big data, special data on the web, and vector types that you will probably also recognize. The next slide, please. So just to conclude with the liaison that we have with ISO DC 211, so we have a cooperation agreement on that. And as we based on standards in a lot of over a lot of ISO standards, for us, it's really essential to ensure this harmonization between the standards and specification, and also to minimize the related cost of implementation. Dgiwg has been and is still a long-term contributor to the development of ISO suite of standards on many topics. And we are used to provide use cases and requirements to ISO, but also of course OGC, to influence the standardization as early as possible to be able at the end to adopt also those kind of standards. I think that's it for me. I give back the floor to Leo.
Thank you, Mary. That was really appreciated. And to the whole team. Could you just go back one slide for me, please? Thank you. Thank you to the whole team, to Jan, Lee, Mary, Dimitri, and I can see many of my other colleagues electronically appearing online. That is, a full hour blast on what Dgiwg does. And speaking to my boss first thing this morning, I was saying to him how good it is to actually be able to have a conversation with a group of technically minded individuals who understand the detail, so that when we tell our story, it's the people who understand where we're going, what we're talking about, rather than having to start with the most basic explanation again of why standardization is really important. So I appreciate the time we've had this morning. The only one I wanted to add, and it really is on what Mary has said there, we as a defence facing organisation are looking at an increasingly unstable world. I'm sat here in uniform. Many of my colleagues either do or have worn it and work alongside those that do. We're trying to understand whether there are things we can do that are more operationally focused, that are quicker, and I think, as was said earlier, the years it takes to get something through the process to where either NATO or the UN or other nations are comfortable with using it and it's ready, is potentially not quick enough. And what we're trying to understand, and would be very grateful for input from ISO, and we'll be saying the same thing to our OGC colleagues, is how we can either focus or accelerate that journey, and working together with the things that you're doing, so that we can get our standardization, our framework, our profiling into the hands of the defence organisations more quickly to meet their needs. That was the only one I wanted to add on, and you'd expect that as a good military officer looking at the future of the organisation. But I genuinely appreciate the opportunity we've had to tell you all about, or to update many of you on Dgiwg. And I think the whole team are available if there are questions either in the room or virtually online. But let me hand back into the rooms. It'll probably be far easier for Jan or a member of the team there to coordinate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, and yeah, thank you. Now we have actually the Q&A part. So if anyone have any questions, please step forward. And if you don't want to give us the question here, you can always approach us whenever. Yeah.
If I can give an endorsement and a question both, is that okay?
Yeah.
I wanted to start by noting that these liaison arrangements between Dgiwg and the other standards bodies, I'm speaking on behalf of OGC, are really critical, and it's truly reflected in round tripping of information and capabilities. So many would argue that the vast majority of use cases early in OGC's history came from Dgiwg and its constituent members, the defense community. To that extent, it's still probably the largest single contributor to requirements. Those get reflected in our standards. Those standards then get profiled by Dgiwg, and those profiled standards come back into OGC as best practices. And we would argue also that our best practice documents are usually our most important documents because they show you how to use the standard in a specific operational context, since that's more valuable than just a blank standard. So the relationship's really valuable. And we're seeing it now reflected as OGC will be adopting the Dgiwg reference architecture pattern for our own reference architecture work. So it's a great relationship. Which then leads to the one question I have is maybe you or Marie can update. What is the status, and maybe it was on the slide, but I didn't see it, on the API guidance work that's ongoing in Dgiwg? And might we be able to see that in TC211 and OGC to help us inform what we want to do with APIs?
I think that's a very good question. They have a week. Sorry, unfortunately, Jan is not here because he's part of that panel. They had a meeting last week in somewhere in US. I don't know the status of that document, but it is promised to be in the pipeline and to be really short. But how short is short, we don't know.
And Gary will probably be in the building later on today if you want to ask him directly with that.
He might be the one that has to check.
I sometimes send emails, but what did it come?
He might be able to give a better answer than I can give him. Yep.
Peter Parslow here. I first of all actually use the fact that Scott's comments were from the back of the room to check the quality of our new in-room microphone system. Could people online confirm or deny whether they could actually hear Scott?
Thumbs up.
Good. It may not work quite as well when we've got twice as many people in the room. We'll check again. But what I really wanted to say is I've been not connected to the defence community for 15 years in the UK, so it's very helpful to me to get that update. So I must admit, as chair of TC211, I've perhaps not paid as much attention to Dgiwg as I should have been doing, because I was particularly impressed by Dimitri's presentation and the NATO CWIX bit with the maturity model and the ability to recognize that you're testing different specifications that are at different levels of maturity in the same test. And that's kind of intriguing in an academic point of view, but also gives, we need to make sure that when we receive feedback, we're aware of segregation that up, but it will come back pretty well structured. So that should be convenient for us. And I think we at TC211 need to pay more attention to the potential value of Dgiwg and in that sense of NATO, if you like, as the experimental arm of Dgiwg from our perspective, in the same way as we do with the OGC Innovation Programme, as a place to learn how the standards are working in practice, whether or not they're still being drafted or they have been published. So that's a positive. We need to think for ourselves at TC211, how do we do that round trip loop that Scott talked about without getting in the way. But I do hear also the challenge that Neil gave to do our job faster. That's something you won't be surprised to hear we're well aware of and have been talking about a few times in the week. If you think that in one sense, that's, I presented an overview of the last 30 years and we are faster than we used to be. So that was something that Jan was talking about there. But there are things in practice to try and speed up the process of the formal standards development part. But we do very much value as well the interaction. We've had it so far more with OGC Innovation, with the experimental part, because that can help to make sure that when you actually publish the standard, it's already been demonstrated to be useful rather than that being something you do afterwards. So that should shorten the time between having the idea and having a working implementation, because it's not years of standardizing and then we'll see if it works, which I think has been the case if we go back quite a long time. And even this week, this will be in my AG2 report to plenary, but some of you are in AG2. I think we reaffirmed our commitment to saying that we see that the model, in most cases, are UML-rich standards, the UML model being the authoritative source and the desire to drive what we're calling machine readable artifacts from that, so things to help implementations. And we're going to interact quite proactively as far as we can with ISOs, both their positive attempt to be improving that themselves, a thing called ISO Smart Projects, which we've been engaging with for a few years, and is unfortunately we're feeling isn't going fast enough. But also with what we only heard about just yesterday, someone who went, which is that some in ISO are quite concerned about that. So we want to make sure we tell the value of providing implementation artifacts so that user communities can actually use the standards. And I think that we now have the ability to present that case quite strongly to ISO, but we can't, we don't have a vote, if you like, in how ISO decides to do things, and a different community to OTC or to Dgiwg. We're part of that bigger thing. So well, for the process of geospatial standardization, I'm confident that the business of producing standards which can be implemented and have been proven already will improve and improve. But how much TC211 can take a lead in that and how much we need to follow others, we'll discover as we relate to the rest of ISO on that subject. If anyone wants to work out what on earth's behind those words, I'll have to talk to me over Steve.
May I add something to that regarding the interaction between Dgiwg and ISO? We have just a very recent example. ISO 19115.1 is out for systematic review, and I will look at you, Marie. In our technical panel, I'm part of the panel. We have taken some of the experience we have gained from our work with giving support to other profiles, other implementation programs on metadata. And we will provide this as a comment into the revision process. So actually there are some continuous work on improving that and providing feedback to the ISO work.
Yes, and I'd say, from my perspective as chair, the fact that liaisons don't get the vote should in no way stop them from commenting. And when it comes to whether to revise the standard or not, the comments are the things that influence the vote. Other people say revise but can't tell you why they want to revise. That doesn't count as saying you should revise. People tell you need to change this, then the people who do have the vote will tend to listen. So you make the comments and comments that come from field experience and that are the most valuable.
And I want to also add perhaps that the comment at least on the metadata is coming from the friends.
Yeah, so you can come through a couple of bodies that do get votes. Yes.
So we won't be again at the Dgiwg comment, but then
Paul had a
Yeah, my name is Paul Knox from the Netherlands. Thank you for this very clear view of what Dgiwg is doing. I was wondering about that several years ago we talked about serious gaming, and as related to the smart city use cases and the experience the military or the defense has with mimicking real world situations in representation for exercising or strategic things. Now we are dealing or talking about digital twinning, also in this TC211. Do you see any overlap there? And is Dgiwg also involved in that serious gaming?
well, what you just said, I talked about trends even in the last few weeks of 3D and digital twin of turbine being mentioned quite a lot. So I think they will start to emerge as a trend in the Dgiwg, and then obviously we'll look at if and how we need to engage with that. These days, it's not something I'm personally familiar with, but maybe others within the Dgiwg community will have some insight, and that discussion can begin. And if it's a trend that we should be following, or we can identify the requirement for that, that is again
something we will need to look at. But as we put out in the requirement, we need to identify who needs it in our community, because that will drive the source of its ability to actually look at it properly. That's one of our key drivers. Requirements of utility is always a challenge.
Okay, good. I think we have an overlap there, so we should look in the future on how this evolves. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm from Australia. I'm representing Jamaica. I didn't see Jamaica's map over there. So if there are specific requirements on how military in other countries like Jamaica can join this initiative.
Well, would you or Lee? Neil?
Lee, do you want to go for it? It'll just be easier from the room, I think.
I was going to say, if you want to have a conversation, I can certainly put you in contact with our secretariat, and they will provide any additional information that you need on how to move forward. There is in the slide pack, we'll go around if you move the slides on, we've made a few slides with some key contacts and also some links to our websites that will provide anybody who wants to go and find such information. But by all means, I'm happy to pass your details on to our secretariat. Neil, do you want to add anything to that?
That's exactly what I was going to say, Lee. Thank you. That, yeah, we're very open to questions, to expressions of interest, people wanting to know more. If anyone wants to reach out to Chris, who runs the secretariat for us, please do, and we can start a conversation.
Oh. Oh.
No. It was not based on the information that Maggie said, but in San Australia. I attended a symposium last week on knowledge graphs and technologies that Ben's was running. And it's actually the Dgiwg in Australia that said I could go to this first open day, which was great. Very interesting. It's obviously an emerging space, which is on the side also. There's one speaker in UK government who's trying to use the existing ontological standards in ISO as a basis for work ongoing. The rest of the community research being cheaper in the room is not happy about standardising the space. But you know, Dgiwg is going to be getting involved in this in the future. Using geographic information and photographs and things, that's something to
that's again a little bit of trend, and that space is something we are monitoring, not something we or this particular panel has largely involved in. It's a space we're monitoring, but we don't know where we're going with that just yet. I think that's the only way it could be the answer.
Just curious.
Yeah. We have been monitoring that for the year. Now, and we have notes on the environment on that, and it's not beyond all these concepts that have been very context. So yeah, that's the status in the state for the again mentioned contact also potential those are very well, they are not there yet, and they don't know.
Andrew, it's interesting to hear that there is some in Dgiwg also beginning to explore in that knowledge graph space, because so far most of our external discussions around that have been with people in the Euro SDR community and or the ODC community. The way I would put it is that I don't see TC211 in that sense standardizing knowledge graphs, but what we might do that in future if our members suggest it's a good plan, But what we're trying to do at present is express what would be our nodes in the knowledge graph. This is a concept that we claim out authorship of, to make sure that we put that out into the world in a way that suits them better than that current offering. Some of the pushback is, well, that's, you know, isn't quite right, please do it differently. So we have got some expertise in Australia actually helping us to get better at the way we publish our concepts, our statements and things into a knowledge graph environment, rather than standardizing what people then do with those things.
I think that was the key thing. I think that's one of the trends. We have our DGIT standard, which defines those concepts.
Yeah.
It's not that we will create standards for data. Those things. It's how does our standards interact with that space.
Be interesting to shorten that feedback loop with people in the Dgiwg community who are trying to use the expression of our content in that space. They can probably help us to get better at it.
Trying to standardize on all of this, so that third-party providers provide support for the instance that they were doing black things and everyone, as you were getting away from properly, it's time to ensure that
Our conversation to top level ontologies people over there and say good luck with that. Sorry.
Yes, if anyone in the room can standardize ontology across all subject areas for us, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? I think in terms of the new and difficult, the way in which plenty of organizations are trying to do that is almost feels like it's doing the reverse of standardization. When you need an interpretation engine for an ontology, it definitely doesn't seem to be the right direction. But yeah, many people looking at it, and I'm like my colleagues, hugely keen to understand how that will work in our space.
What comments, discussions?
It was only a sort of comment back on that. It's the across all subjects we would say goes therefore beyond our scope. We feel more comfortable as saying, you know, we are the authority, not me personally, but collectively for, you know, expressing position. If you want to know, you know, how to make sure you know where you are in the world, that's our space. Making that information available in an ontological environment is. But the problem is that those ontological environments, the top level ontologies and so on, are well, I don't say many, but they're certainly varied.
Okay. If that's the last word, I think we can close this session almost on time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for attending, and thank you very much, Neil, for presenting. And well, have a good day, all of you. Thank you.
I'd say too, thank you to those who've come in just specifically for this session, to Neil, to Lee, who's, I don't know, nearer to London or made the trip to London. Thank you. But yeah, and Dimitri online and Marie, are sort of been here all week in that sense. So but thank you for pulling that together. That's been a really useful insight to me, and you've heard, you know, also to others about how the Dgiwg community is making use of our standards and how that use can then feed back to us. So I think that's, yeah, it's an eye-opener to me, actually. So thank you very much. Thank you, Neil, for taking the time to join me.
Appreciate it. Thank you all. Have a really great rest of the session.
Thank you. Bye-bye.